The next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the universal selector. The universal selector is a selector that basically is shorthand for selecting every single tag on your page or within your site. We've talked a little bit about contextual selectors, and we talked about grouping selectors, and basically you can group things together to apply the same style properties to several different page elements at the same time. The universal selector kind of takes it a step farther. So basically, here's my code for this page right here. I have an H2 heading, I have a paragraph, a list, an H3 heading, a paragraph, an H3 heading, and then two more paragraphs. I have several div tags. I have a div tag with an ID of top, and that is basically wrapped around the first two headers and the list and the first two paragraphs. And then I have another div with an ID of mid, and it is wrapped around this content right here. And we'll kind of come back to why we have the divs momentarily. I've already set up the code that I need to create a style just for this page, and that just makes it easier for us to demonstrate what we're working on here. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make a style, but I'm going to use the universal selector. To use the universal selector, you basically are going to use the asterisk. So here, if I put asterisk, and then I go ahead and I open my curly brace and I close my curly brace, just like we've done before. Everything else remains the same. And let's just do a color. So I'm going to go ahead and specify a color. And here I will go ahead and use a color of green. You can use the hex values as we've been using in the past, or you can just type a color in there. The browser will render that. So I'm going to save my page, and I'm doing the keyboard shortcut of Command S, and I'm going to go to my browser and I'll reload the page here. And you can see that every single item on my page now becomes green. The universal selector is going to affect every single thing. Now, because of how cascading style sheets work, I can override the universal selector by making a style for, let's say, paragraphs. So if I go ahead and make a style for paragraphs, and let's just set the color for all paragraphs to be, I'll just use black. And I save my page and I refresh, you can see that now everything in my page is going to be green. H2s, H3s, list items, except paragraphs are not, and that's because the paragraph tag is closer than the everything tag, essentially. So the paragraph will go ahead and override this universal selector. The universal selector can be very useful. I use it a lot, for instance, for just turning my margins and padding off for everything in my page so that nothing has default margins and paddings, because everything has some sort of default margin or padding. All block level elements do anyways. The body tag is pushing content away from the top and the left edge of the browser. Headers, paragraphs, lists, they all have some sort of padding and margin. So I like to use universal selectors for just getting rid of padding and margin, excuse me. So if I go ahead and type padding in here and just put it to set to 0 pixels, and then I'm going to set my margin, and by not specifying like margin top, margin bottom, by just specifying margin, I'm setting the margin for everything on my page. And now if I come back and I reload the page, you can see how everything starts at the very upper top left, and nothing has any sort of inherent padding at all. Everything looks more like a line break in between the items than like a block level element. So they actually are treated more almost like inline type elements, where there is a BR tag between the items that are being separated. Of course, you would need to put styles to make this more user-friendly to spread things out, but this is a way that I like to use the universal selector. So you'll see me using this later on in the course. For now, I'm going to actually get rid of the margin and padding for this example, just because it's going to be easier for us to see the content when it has a little bit of spread. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the default settings there. So this hopefully has shown you how to use the universal selector. The universal selector can also be used to go ahead and select a specific portion of your website, and that's kind of why I have the div tags in here, because I could use the universal selector to select everything that is within a particular element or within a particular part of my page. So let's go ahead and I'm going to get rid of this tag that's styling my paragraphs black. So I'm going back to what I had in the very beginning, where just everything in my page is going to be green, like so. And now, because remember the first two headers and the first two paragraphs in the list are in my top div tag right here, and then my last header and my last two paragraphs are in my mid div tag, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to universally select everything that's inside my top div. So because I'm dealing with a div that has an ID, I need to specify using the hash mark. So I'm going to type hash top space asterisk, and then I'll go ahead and I'll prepare my style, and we'll just use color because that certainly is one of the easiest items to be able to see. So color colon, and then let's make the color we'll pick a blue or something like that. So I'm going to specify that the color in the top ID, the top div, is going to be blue, and that basically is going to affect everything in here. So if I come back to my page and I reload the page, you can now see that everything within this top div takes on my properties that I specified, and it doesn't matter if it's a paragraph or an H2 or an H3 or a list. All of these things are going to take on that property. Everything that's within my mid div tag still remains styled based on whatever style I had prepared, and here I had used just the global universal selector to make everything green. Then for the top div, I universally styled everything within the top div to have a color of blue. So hopefully you can start to see the power of being able to have a universal selector where I don't have to specify, like here, if I wanted to color all these items without using the universal selector, I would have to specify, top paragraph, comma, top H2, comma, top H3, comma, top UL, and my my CSS could get a lot longer. Here I can just say everything in top. Asterisk equates to everything. So that can be very useful, and I'm sure that you'll find many instances where you'll appreciate the universal selector.